Oh, wow, thank you. I brought my tissues because I will likely cry. Sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. This is amazing to see everyone here. I feel so honored to be up here looking out at you guys, such amazing, talented people, and I feel really great energy. And as I was saying, usually when there's lots of energy and lots of spirit, I do get more emotional and I tend to cry more, so bear with me. So, bonjour Anin, Kanimet, Wewete, Ikwe, Nadijnakaj, Makwadodam. The name given to me by the creator is Dancing Northern Lights Woman, and I'm of the Bear Clan. As Sarah had said, I am Métis from the Red River Settlement in Manitoba. I work, live, and play on Treaty 1 territory and the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, the Sinowek, the Dakota Oyate, the Dene Suline, and the Neowe nations. It is also the homeland of the Red River Métis. I'm so happy and grateful to be here in the beautiful Vancouver area and a guest on the unceded territory of the Gos Salish people, including the territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I feel very honored I got to work with some of the elders from these lands to plan this conference. I've learned a lot from them, and they hold a special point in my heart now. When I was first asked to do this keynote, a while back for PRIDoC on behalf of Canada, I felt very honored, very humbled, but that was soon replaced with feeling nervous, having fear, and wondering what could I possibly say to you guys that you'd want to hear? What do I have to share? I started to feel like maybe I wasn't the right person to do this talk, and I didn't really know what I was going to talk about. For some of you that don't know me, I'm the director of the Longitudinal Indigenous Health Curriculum for our undergrad medical education at the U of M where I work. And this past year, I incorporated an Indigenous cohort for our Indigenous students for topics like the legacy of residential schools in order to create safe spaces and places for us to talk about these really hard, triggering topics. That have different meaning for our Indigenous students than some of our other students. We had the first session a few months ago, and we were having a sharing circle. And one of our Indigenous students shared that they felt like an imposter, and that they had imposter syndrome, and that they were struggling with feeling this way. And as we ran around the sharing circle, a few of the other students had shared that they felt this way too. And I nodded in agreement because I too had felt this way and still feel this way at times and was feeling that way when I was asked to do this speech today. And I know that this is something many of our students, our First Nations, Inuit, and Métis students have felt over the years, and I've heard this over and over again. And I've heard our colleagues, my peers, feel this way too and have used this term before. And so it got me thinking, because I felt like this throughout my education in undergrad, medical school, and even in my career as a physician. So I started thinking, why was I feeling this way? Why were so many of our First Nation, Métis, and Inuit students feeling this way? I thought, I know what it feels like to have imposter syndrome, but I started thinking, I'm not sure if I really know what it is. And where is this feeling coming from? And that kind of got me to go on this course for this talk. And so I thought, how can I overcome this today to do this talk? I needed courage to face my greatest challenge, myself. I needed to confront feelings of anger, fear, self-doubt, and even hurt within myself. I told you I was going to cry. And that's how I chose to do this topic on combating imposter syndrome through culture and connecting to the land. I'm gonna have a hard time reading my notes with tears in my eyes. It's a little blurry. To give you a bit of background on imposter syndrome, it's loosely defined as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. This concept of imposter syndrome was first coined in 1978 by psychologists Pauline Rose Clance and Susan Imes. And it was originally termed imposter phenomena. And it really focused on high-achieving women, and that the theory was that despite outstanding achievement, they felt like people were fooled in believing that they were successful or achieving, or that they weren't really bright. Now, I recognize that this syndrome or phenomena is not unique to Indigenous people, but I think for Indigenous people, it means more than just feeling like you fooled people. The initial theories failed to recognize systemic factors of racism, colonialism, and paternalism as the true roots of imposter syndrome for us. It fails to... Thank you. It fails to recognize that our education systems, our health systems, and our legal systems were never designed to include us as Indigenous people. They were actually designed to exclude us. For us, imposter syndrome goes back farther than 1970s. It goes back to initial attempt to remove us from our lands. In fact, here in Canada, it was legislated, and one of those legislations was the Indian Act developed in 1876 that is still in legislation today. It banned ceremony, it enacted the residential school systems, and it prevented involvement in elections, political organization, and legislated taking the lands, to name a few things. How can we be imposters on our own lands? Through colonization and assimilation tactics, they removed our connection to the land. We connected to land through our protocols, through our ceremonies, through our songs, our birthing practices, and right through our death practices. We connected through our ancestors. We feel like imposters because our connection to the spirit of the land has been disrupted. I'm going to share a little story, a bit of personal story about my own journey. When I was in my second year of medical school, I went through something quite traumatic. I'd always done well academically throughout university and through my first year of medical school. But this experience I went through had a profound impact on me. Sorry. It impacted the way I was able to study, the way I was able to concentrate and focus, and the way I was taking care of myself spiritually, physically, mentally, and emotionally. I initially took a withdrawal from that year because I was struggling. But my next year didn't go much better because I didn't have time to heal. And when I was called into the office of the medical school to say they wanted to help me, I was confronted with statements like, maybe medicine isn't for you. Did you ever think of nursing? And other statements and messaging that said I didn't belong. This was a really pivotal moment in my life, and it really changed the way I viewed myself within the school, my self-esteem, and I started to feel like maybe I didn't belong. And to this day, I still struggle with that a bit. And I'm working on it, and I have amazing leaders and support that have helped me through all this way. The incident I went through had direct links to the effects of the intergenerational trauma of residential schools. I didn't realize that at the time. I was just going through something. And our schools and our institutes don't understand, and they don't acknowledge the burden that we have to carry with us. A burden that was not ours, but imposed on us. And I left that moment with the message I was not good enough. and maybe medicine wasn't for me. Luckily, during that year, the next year that I went into that second year, our university had the Center for Indigenous Health Education open up, and there was an elder in residence, our beautiful Margaret Lavallee, who I love and is dear to my heart. And I had space to feel safe, and I had space where I belonged and that I could continue to learn about our traditional teachings and reconnect to ceremony. And I was able to reconnect to the land, and as a result, my own identity. I learned about respecting all things around me, the land, the animals, the water, and in doing so, I learned to respect myself. After I was able to have time and space to heal, I was successful with the remainder of my medical education. But I still carried that feeling that I didn't belong and I wasn't good enough. Then when I was applying for residency positions, I had applied to 2 programs, psychiatry and the Northern Family Medicine program, both at the University of Manitoba. When I went to the interview for psychiatry, they kept asking me about that year that got interrupted. They kept focusing, and I'd kind of give a vague answer, but they wouldn't move on. And they just kept focusing on that. And so I got emotional. Not because I hadn't healed from what had happened to me, but because that was still impacting my career and my journey going forward. No matter what I did, that's all they saw. They didn't ask me about the work I was involved in since that year. During that time, in my second, third, and fourth year, I was a student rep on the board of IPAC. For 2 years. I was the first student rep when IPAC renamed itself. I went up north to isolated fly-in communities to mentor Indigenous students about being in medicine. I was on a board for our Center for Aboriginal Health Education. I co-chaired during that time. But none of that mattered. That's not what they saw. They could not see my value. Needless to say, I didn't get an offer to the residency spot in psychiatry that year. When I went to my interview for the Northern Family Medicine program, they didn't ask me really about that second year at all. They asked me about all the other things I had done. They saw value in who I was and what I could bring to the program. At first, this was really hard because I felt a bit rejected, because I didn't get into psychiatry. And that's kind of where I was leaning. But I needed to embrace the teachings of honesty and to be honest with myself and recognize that I have gifts and strength and they have value. I needed to be in a place and a space that also recognized that I had value and it valued those gifts I had to bring. We feel like imposters because our connection to the spirit of the land has been disrupted. I'm still learning how to connect to the spirit of the land. And as our beautiful elder Suqualia said recently at our grad ceremony in May, we can always represent who we are and what we do. We can gain wisdom through the land, animals, water, and fire. Our elders can teach us how to connect to creation. I knew I made the right decision to accept the offer to the Northern Remote Family Med program when I was in my first year of residency. We were the first cohort in the program, and I was the only Indigenous resident in the program. In that first year, we have a winter retreat every year, and we go out to the beautiful White Shell area, which is kind of along the border of Manitoba and Ontario, and there's lots of little lakes, and it's very in nature. It's a very beautiful area. And my fellow program residents had asked me to teach them about smudging because they were in the Northern Remote program and they knew they were going to go into Indigenous communities and they wanted to learn. And so I passed tobacco to Elder Margaret Lavallee and said, can I teach them about smudging? I knew about smudging, but I didn't know if I could teach them. And we sat there and she gave me teachings and she said, yeah, I want you to share them with your residents. And so at our retreat, we did that. And we did that as a group. And on the way back from the sweat, or from the retreat, we had a sweat lodge at Margaret's house with her husband, who's also an elder, Jules. And I received my spirit name that day with all my fellow residents and my program faculty in the sweat. And it was very powerful. And my residents and staff were very respectful, and they appreciated the experience and being part of it. This was another pivotal moment for me, but in a good way. I actually felt valued as an Indigenous physician, and that I had something of value to bring to the table. This allowed me and my peers to share about themselves too, and where they came from and their gifts. I was later asked to come on as faculty in my second year of resident before I graduated, and I still work there today. We learned about humility. We recognize we're all learning and we all have gifts. I need to value and embrace my gifts and the gifts of others for the collective goal. I'm not alone. I have community, and I am stronger because of that community. Kanimet wewe te ikwe, dancing Northern Lights woman, the name given to me that day. The Creator was telling me I was in the right place, and I spent the next 7 years of my career working in Northern Manitoba and parts of Nunavut. We feel like imposters because our connection to the spirit of the land has been disrupted. Imposter syndrome is not ours. We need to give it back. We are rooted in our lands, and our ancestors walk with us. We are strong and we have spirit, Gitchimanadu, to guide us. One of our knowledge keepers, who's here today, is true to my heart at the University of Manitoba, Leslie Spillett, recently said, "We are the best of our ancestors," and it's true. We've been passed on their gifts, and we have them to help us. A few months ago, I got to hear the Honorable Murray Sinclair speak in Selkirk, Manitoba, which I have a lot of family roots and went to high school there, so it was really neat to hear him speak there. And for those of you who are not familiar with him, he was the first Indigenous judge in the province of Manitoba, where I'm from, and chairs the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, and a former senator. He said, "We need to ask, where do we come from? Where do our people come from? What are our creation stories? We need to know who we are in connection to our lands. This is truth." I want to go back to my story about our session I had with the cohort of Indigenous medical students. During that session, we had our elders lead us in a smudge and teaching us about the 7 natural ways of healing. We were able to do the whole session in our medicine garden on the land next to our medicines growing. We incorporated Indigenous ways of knowing, sharing through our sharing circles. We were able to have a safe space to share our feelings of imposter syndrome, of our barriers that we face within the university and the healthcare system, and the barriers our families face within the healthcare system. We had tears, and we had laughs. And we were also able to work and learn in a way that was reflective of our values. This is reconnecting to the land. We had a summer solstice ceremony on June 21st at the university's health science campus. We started with a pipe ceremony. We had elders doing traditional teachings. We sang our songs and held up our drums with pride. My son joined me, who's 9, by the way, not 8. That part was older. He'd be upset if I didn't correct that. But he joined us in the drum in front of probably almost 100 faculty. And this was a very important moment because we were reclaiming space in our institution. We are addressing the systemic barriers that exist for Indigenous learners and faculties. We are sharing who we are and our strengths and value within the institution. This is reconnecting to the land. We are all here today and are growing every year as an organization. It is amazing to see a sea of Indigenous doctors, educators, elders. We are working within our universities and our healthcare systems, and we are reclaiming our space, our culture, our knowledge. We have growing numbers of allies wanting to be a part of this because they also see the importance of our ways of knowing. This is reconnecting to the land. For me, it is important to go back to our teachings. I've been taught from our elders the 7 sacred teachings, and they teach me of truth, respect, honesty, humility, wisdom, and love. They are the principles and values that help guide my work, my family, my wellness, and if you've noticed, they've guided this talk today. If I can love myself, I will be able to live by all the teachings. It is through love that we can heal ourselves, our families, and our communities. If we have our teachings, then we can no longer be imposters on our lands. Our teachings, our ceremonies, our value connect us back to the spirit of the land. Chimigwich to all of you and to all the elders who are here tonight with us and who help us connect to our ancestors and our land.